National Eating Disorders Awareness Week is February 22nd through 28th, 2021. I'm someone who has an intimate history with eating disorders, which is why I am so passionate about the work that the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness is doing. This episode of the Wantcast is in support of the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness. It's a national nonprofit organization dedicated to the outreach, education, early intervention, support, and advocacy for all eating disorders. The Alliance will be hosting their first ever Not One More weekend, taking place February 26th through 28th. This will be a virtual 3-day event focusing on what the Alliance does best: help, support, and recovery. This international movement will urge individuals to reach out for help, get support, and imagine a life beyond their eating disorder. Proceeds from the weekend will directly fund the Alliance's free weekly, therapist-led virtual eating disorder support groups. To learn more, visit allianceforeatingdisorders.com, check out the show notes, or just listen to this episode. This is the Wantcast, the Women Against Negative Talk podcast, episode 121. Welcome back to Season 7 of the Wantcast, the Women Against Negative Talk podcast, lessons in moving forward fearlessly and spreading the good word. I'm Katie Horwitch. I'm a writer, a speaker, a mindset coach, and the founder of Women Against Negative Talk, a platform that gives you tips, tools, motivation, and inspiration to shift your self-talk patterns. I have missed you so much over the last month, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to be starting up Season 7 with renewed energy. I don't know if you could hear in my voice, but I feel like there has been just life breathed into me over the last month and a half that we've been apart. I'm so excited to be kicking off this season of the Wantcast, Season 7, with such a powerful guest. Before we get going, I want to get you up to speed on what's going on the want end of things and what's been brewing over the last month and a half. Our community, the Want community, is just soaring and shining and sparkling. I am so thrilled to be a part of this community platform. If you don't know yet, it is our private members-only club by women for women that gives you encouragement, empowerment, and support to move forward fearlessly in your life and shift your self-talk patterns. So it is an extension of everything we do here on the Wantcast, everything we do over on womenagainstnegativetalk.com. Really, it's the natural extension of everything that we've been doing together for the last 6+ years now. What you get when you're a part of the Want community is you get daily emails, Monday through Friday. They are bite-sized pieces of encouragement, prompts to get you thinking, and letters to start off your day from the person and the entity that knows you the closest, which is yourself. You also get access to our members-only app, our community platform, where we have conversations throughout the week and you get weekly prompts and challenges to keep you moving forward fearlessly. No joke, I've been a part of a lot of online communities since, I was a teenager, and this is hands down one of the most uplifting, supportive places that I've ever seen, that I've ever been a part of. We also have monthly meetups, we have a quarterly mag, and tons of other perks just for members. So to join us, go to jointhewantcommunity.com. Pick the price point that works for you. Membership starts at $4.99 a month, and then we'll see you in the Want community. Also, we have the Want Yourself retreat coming up in October 4th through 9th in Paros, Greece, which I have linked to in the show notes. It is a full week of finding, being, and staying yourself. I've co-created this retreat with the women over at travelgems.com, and this is what we hope will be right up your alley and exactly what you need post-pandemic. We've also, speaking of that, made the deposits 100% refundable, which is like unheard of in the retreat space. So you can feel safe when you're securing your spot. And I've put the link to that in the show notes again. And maybe the most exciting announcement here, I am officially taking new one-on-one clients. So I know I say it in the intro, but just in case you didn't know, I am a mindset coach. I work with people to develop systems and strategies that create real lasting change. I, of course, specialize in shifting your self-talk. That applies to quite literally anything, personally, professionally, anywhere where you feel like you can make shift happen. I want to help you get there. So I like to focus on not just where you've been or where you are, but where you're going from here. I am obsessed with tangible outcomes, and I aim to help any of my clients that I work with feel empowered to take their lives into their own hands long after our sessions are complete. I am not here to be the person that you feel like you always have to lean on to feel like you are actually moving forward and being proactive, not reactive in your life. I am super, super passionate on you taking your life into your own hands. So if you are interested, you can email me at katie@womenagainstnegativetalk.com and we can discuss rates. I work on a sliding scale, hours, we can set up an intro call, and I cannot wait to work with more of you on this more intimate basis. All right, let's get into today's episode because it is a doozy and we cover so much good ground. Today's brilliant, brilliant guest is Johanna Kandel, the founder of the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness. After recovering from a 10-year-long battle with various eating disorders, Johanna founded the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness. Since it began 20 years ago, the Alliance has brought information and awareness about eating disorders to more than, I hope I get this right, 340,000 individuals nationally and internationally. And in addition, Johanna runs free weekly support groups, mentors individuals with eating disorders and their families, and helps thousands of people gain information and find the help they need. This is a super nuanced, super candid, super real discussion between Johanna and I, who have both struggled with eating disorders. And what I find really special about this conversation, besides the fact that Johanna is just so warm and genuine and was such a pleasure to talk to, it is so, so very clear why she is as powerful of a mentor as she is. But part of what I find special about this conversation is it's not just for and about people who have struggled with eating disorders. This conversation also addresses all of the other people who are involved in the reign of an eating disorder, from family to friends to coworkers and relationships. And we really dive into how people who have struggled with eating disorders or maybe are struggling right now with an eating disorder can move forward proactively even when it feels the toughest, and how you, as someone with someone you know who has an eating disorder in your life, how you can be the most supportive and proactive person possible in that person's life. This conversation is one that I suggest you listen to multiple times, that you share it widely, because you never know who is struggling and suffering in silence. And if you like this episode, we would be so grateful if you went to iTunes, rated the podcast, reviewed the podcast, tell people why they should be listening, because those reviews, believe it or not, actually help the podcast show up in people's feeds so that they can get these types of conversations and this type of support in their lives. All right, let's get to it. I cannot wait for you to meet Johanna. Here she is. We both have experienced eating disorders, and that's what led me to not necessarily realizing like, oh, self-talk and negative self-talk is an issue, but it's what led me to start to explore, what do real lasting solutions look like? Like, I know this is a problem, but what does it look like to live in a world where we are moving forward proactively as people, as humans, as a society together. And for me, I would say that that point in my eating disorder was sort of the turning point for me. Did you experience a point in your own journey where you were like, oh, this is something that isn't being discussed and really needs to be?
Yeah. And, I really just want to say too, just how excited I am to share space with you and do this recording with you. It's very, very special to me. And thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability of saying, I experienced an eating disorder too. And I'm on the other side of it because, that's really for me what was sort of that fire in my belly to found the Alliance 20 years ago. For me, like when I started on my journey to recovery from my eating disorders, there were so many things that could have happened during my experience that would have been a game changer for me. It would have literally changed the course of my life. I was a professional ballet dancer. I had to stop dancing because of my eating disorder. And that was my one true love. Like that was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But there were so many things like being hospitalized at 17 and a half, and they never once said the word eating disorder. And I went to a hospital where, just so crazy that our now clinical director, who has, 40 years experience treating eating disorders, was actually on staff. And even though I fit the archaic stereotypical mold of what society thinks eating disorders look like and who they affect, there was never that intervention. And then when I first went to seek treatment at the age of 21, I went to a lovely clinician. She was wonderful and incredible, had no clue about eating disorders. And, there I was, like sick and tired of being sick and tired. And my desire to take a peek around the corner to see if there was life beyond eating disorders was just a smidgen more than my sort of comfortability in the thing that was actually killing me, keeping me alive and killing me. And I went and I saw her and she said, Joanna, I'm really happy that you're here. However, I must tell you that you're going to experience this. You're going to struggle with this for the rest of your life. And in that moment, I was thinking, well, then why the hell am I here if it doesn't get better?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think because the lack of intervention, because of the lack of specialized care, and also for me is, especially as time has gone on, we've learned so much more about eating disorders, that they're biopsychosocial illnesses, that they are genetic in nature, that they're not a disorder of choice. For me, I've always been that person that wants to bring light to things that are not talked about. And that was really the thing that projected me forward to, my last semester of undergrad. Like I took out a college loan and actually a school loan, didn't use it for classes.
Yeah.
Started the Alliance, moved back home to South Florida because that's where my family is. They gave me 1 year. They allowed me to defer grad school for 1 year. It's been 21 years now that I've deferred it. And I just really wanted to have conversation. I wanted to smash the stigma surrounding eating disorders and create much needed conversations because I wasn't the first person that has had an eating disorder. And unfortunately, I won't be the last. And individuals that have eating disorders and their loved ones deserve better. And so that's really what it comes down to for me.
Yeah. And, what you said about going to someone, working with someone who was really incredible, but didn't necessarily have a specialty in eating disorders is so important. And especially as we move forward, we're around the same age. And so, early 2000s, late 1990s, really the only eating disorders that were talked about openly are like, okay, you're anorexic or you're bulimic. Everything else is an eating disorder, not otherwise specified.
Correct.
And that's just like this big blanket statement. And so anybody who's in that massive, massive gray area was sort of like, okay, well, I got told I was crazy a lot. I got told, as many people do who have eating disorders, well, why don't you just stop? Why don't you just eat a burger? And it's not ill-intended. It's just that knowledge isn't there,
Right. Yeah, it's so, where the place I've come to is that you said it so beautifully. It's not, there's no malintent. It's not mean. It's just ignorant because when we take a look, even when it comes to medical providers, less than 20% of all medical providers get any access to eating disorder education, which is why one of our big pillars here at the Alliance is to educate our frontline responders, doctors, nurses,
Mhm.
dentists. I mean, 30% of all individuals that will have bulimia nervosa will be first diagnosed with by their dentist. And what's really incredible about dentistry is that, yes, they are taught about what eating disorders look like, how they show up, but they're not giving any tools to how do you talk to your patient when you do see these things. So
Right.
we'll do trainings for them as, this is what to look for, but this is how to talk to your patient and then how to help them access care, because that's always such an important part of it.
Oh my gosh, that's something that, it makes complete sense. I had never thought of it though, where it's so amazing that that's work that you're doing and you're taking to people who are able to spot things like that other people just won't because they're not normally looking
For
close up
sure.
into other people's mouths, you know?
Yep, exactly.
But that's sort of like saying to someone, saying to a running coach that if you see someone and you notice that they're running weird, that they might have a broken leg, that running coach can't fix that broken leg, you
Correct.
know?
Correct. So right on,
Yeah.
and even things like, when we go in and we'll train like hospital systems or private practices, even doing the stuff like putting brochures in our waiting room, automatically it signals to the person who might be struggling in silence because, so many of us live in darkness with our eating disorder because they're very alienating, mental illness. They very much like really grow in isolation and shame. But when people open up those doors for you to possibly reach out for help, where you might have brochures in your waiting room, or even you just bring up the conversation. Like that's why I'm pretty much an open book. I talk about my experience all the time, and it has nothing to do with me wanting to tell my story just for the sake of telling my story. It's because I know I'm not the only one, and something magical happens when you can be in a room with someone or hear a story and say, I thought I was the only one. I feel
Mhm.
so much better that I'm not the only one. And, that has really, really fueled the work that I do day in and day out.
Yeah. What are some of the things you said earlier that in hindsight, you're like, oh gosh, if I had had this resource, if this decision had gone differently, if someone had said something, there are so many game changers that could have happened. I think
Yeah.
those were the words that you used. What are some of the game changers that you noticed looking back on your life that
Mhm.
might have made a difference?
I think, first and foremost was not that like going into that clinician's office the first time and hearing that, oh, you're going to be struggling with this for the rest of your life. Well, that gave me clearance to leave that office and continue my shenanigans and continue to act out in my eating disorder until I came to a point again where I was like, all right, I need to look for someone else to really invest time. But it was such a hassle, and it was really so defeating calling place after place after place after place. And so taking that example for my particular story is what fueled us to develop our comprehensive referral database, which is called findedhelp.com.
Mhm.
And it is the most largest and inclusive referral database system. Wherever you are in the United States, you can go on it, put in your zip code, you can put in your specific insurance, whatever diagnosis you're experiencing, and it can help find all levels of care from outpatient, from a therapist to dietitian, all the way up to acute medical stabilization.
Yeah, I mean, it's so comprehensive.
Thank you.
I would have loved to have had that, and it's helping so many people. I know it.
Well, and again, like when you're not 100% sure that you want to get help, right? Like, and
Mhm.
that's a lot of people when they're experiencing their eating disorder. And I think that that's really difficult for some folks to grasp that have never experienced eating disorders. It's like, this is killing you. Why do you want to continue? Because the eating disorder has a function. They are coping mechanisms. They're maladaptive, but they're coping mechanisms. And at some point, the eating disorder served a purpose. It rescued us for something, whether it was in response to trauma, how to maladaptively cope with anxiety, depression, all of that stuff. So it had a function where, living a life beyond your eating disorder might be unknown and very, very scary. So that's why we really grasp a hold. So if you're having a horrific time finding treatment, of course, people are going to throw their hands up.
Mhm.
The other thing for me that would have absolutely been a game changer was support groups. And that is such a big part of what we do here at the Alliance. And not just peer-to-peer support groups, clinician-led, therapist-led support groups. So that's actually something that I think in the first year that I founded the organization, I started a support group with a local therapist. And since then, we've grown it. We have 21 free weekly therapist-led support groups in cities across the country. Currently not in person because of
Right.
the pandemic, but early last March, we very quickly pivoted from in person to virtual. And now we have 5 free weekly virtual support groups for individuals with eating disorders and their loved ones. And I have to tell you, it's been unbelievable because people from across the globe have been able to log on. Individuals that live in care deserts or have no access to care, no money, are able to hop into a space that's safe because it is overseen by such a great amount of clinicians. But it's also a place where people speak your language, where you can hear someone say something and think, oh my gosh, me too. And in that moment, you don't feel so alone. And so for me, those are two of the real big pillars at the Alliance that really translated in my struggle. It could have changed my course, but I want to make sure that it changes courses for other people.
Oh my gosh. And that's so amazing, especially during this time. There are going to be people who are listening in real time while we're still experiencing the pandemic, and people who are listening, once we're in what eventually ends up being our new normal. Right now, we're in the for now normal. But, I'm hearing from so many people who have been either isolated and they're completely on their own, or they're with, their family unit. They're
Mhm.
just more isolated than they usually would be. And they're saying, I thought that I was past this. I thought that I was past my air quotes eating issues. I
Mhm.
thought that I was past my disordered behaviors. And they're starting to rear their heads
Yeah.
again. And it breaks my heart, and it also makes sense to me.
Yeah. And you're validated. And I really want to say that to whoever's listening and that, might be leaning into some shame because, oh, I was past this, I moved on. This is a difficult time for everyone. I also believe that shame is the biggest hindrance for us getting better.
Mhm.
And for me, I tend to really try to lean in when I can to a place of accountability and vulnerability. And this time has very much, I think, tried all of us. I have a co-occurrence of an anxiety disorder. I've always had anxiety. And that was, for me, one of the many things that contributed to the perfect storm of my eating disorder. And my anxiety has been at bay for years, for decades. And I will tell you honestly that the anxiety I felt during specifically the first half of last year was unparalleled to anything I had felt. And being someone who has the privilege that I have, the power that I have, as far as speaking nationally, internationally about being a recovered human from an eating disorder, and at first I was like, I can't say that. I can't let people know that I'm having a hard time. And then what I
Mhm.
realized is that by me not sharing my truth and being vulnerable, I'm painting an unrealistic picture for other people. So I very quickly turned around and I said, you know what? I don't know how y'all doing, but I'm having a really bad time. And I've had
Mhm.
to reach out for more support and I've had to accommodate. For me, it was upping medication. That's not for everyone, but that was just my personal journey. And something magical happened when I started sharing my truth is that so many people came out and said, oh, thank goodness, me too.
Mhm.
So know that you're not alone. Our levels of acuity for eating disorders are through the roof. Our incident numbers are through the roof. And it makes sense because, you know, um, an amazing dietitian that I know said it so beautifully. She said, this is not a vacation, it's a pandemic. And if all you
Mm.
do is survive, you've succeeded. And so some days, you have to give yourself grace if you're having a hard time getting out of bed or taking a shower. And just because we're physically distanced that does not mean we have to be socially distanced. So
Mm-hmm.
reach out. I think the beauty of all of this, the silver lining, if you will, is the amount of resources that have come out. Like the fact that there is an Instagram page that literally every half an hour there's someone that helps with meal support, and it's all free. All of our services are free, so you're not alone, and you don't have to walk this journey alone.
Side note, I'm going to email you for that Instagram page so I can put it in the show notes for people, because
Absolutely.
I just could see people's eyes lighting up and ears perking up. But you're completely right. And you said, when you were younger, when you were in college, you were dancing, anxiety. It was sort of the perfect storm that
Mhm.
contributed to your eating disorder. And at the same time, it didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't come out of a place that was with malintent. Even our most self-deprecating and self-damaging behaviors come from a place of wanting to do something for us. It makes sense that perfect storm eating disorder is trying to, whether it's trying to create a sense of control or ease or helping you check out of hard situations, it makes sense that people who have experienced one perfect storm are now experiencing another perfect storm that looks completely different. However, the
Mhm.
coping mechanism is still back there in our brain somewhere.
Yep. So true. And, for me, I share with folks all the time, like, I guess if I could epitomize like my experience with an eating disorder is that quote, the path to hell is filled with good intentions. And for me, that was very much like, and I think something that's really important for individuals that are listening is that like you and like me, I never, looked out the window. And for me, I was 11 and a half when my whole experience started and said, it's a beautiful day in West Palm Beach, Florida today. I think I'm going to have anorexia nervosa. Like that wasn't my story. I don't think that's anybody's story.
Right.
For me, eating disorders right in my family. They were on both sides of my family. It wasn't a learned behavior because I didn't see my aunts and uncles that were experiencing them. That was, at a previous time. And so genetics were there. I've always experienced anxiety. I was a perfectionistic people pleaser. Everything in my mind was black or white. Like everything had to fit very neatly in a box.
Mhm.
And then I was a ballet dancer. And so you had all these things that came together. Um, and then I was told, because of the ballet class I was in, to audition for a professional production of The Nutcracker. And it was a blanket statement. We all need you to lose some weight before the audition. And for me, a simple diet was the actual trigger pull, even though yes, I chose to go on a diet, but there were 15 other people in my ballet class, and we all went on a similar type of a diet. And why is it that I was the one that ended up with an almost deadly eating disorder, and the rest of them did what a lot of people, as we know, do? They'll go on a diet, they will get tired, and then they'll like sort of go off the diet, and then they'll start again. They'll get in this very like cyclical like diet mentality. So um, all to say is for me, the diet I went on was to succeed, to be better. And you know what? For the beginning of my eating disorder was very egosyntonic. It worked for me until it didn't, until it almost
Mhm.
tried to kill me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that, I had a similar experience. It wasn't, I was not a ballerina, quite the opposite, but I was a musical theater major
Mhm.
in college. And as a musical theater major, it's required that you take dance classes every single morning. And so this is not the thing that made me start restricting and started me down my path of an eating disorder. But I will say, when you are placed in a room as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old who is already self conscious, who's already trying to figure herself out, because who isn't at 18 or 19, and you're staring at yourself in the mirror every day.
Mhm.
Um, as humans, we are not meant to look at ourselves and critique
Mhm.
our form, as they call it in dance,
Yep.
or fitness. We're not meant to look at ourselves and critique our form for that long, that many days a week, you know?
And the thing about musical theater and ballet and a lot of these, just a lot of these arts, if you will, is that I don't think, I don't know if it's ever happened for you, but like there was never, ever a teacher that said, you know what, that was perfect. We don't have to rehearse again. We don't have to do it again. It's never good enough. You could always be better. And that for me was so telltale of like, there's always better. There's always better. There's always better. And, it's something that even to this day, so long after my recovery is something that I consistently have to work on and show up and do the work for, is that sometimes good enough is good enough. And especially when you're already predisposed to have that personality trait of being
Mm.
perfectionistic. And then you grow up in a world where it's like, you're never going to be good enough. So you have to keep on trying forever. And so it all comes together, and I see it come in like my work that I do now is like, as running this organization. And you're right, being in pink tights and a black leotard in front of a mirror is just, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
You
Well, and
know.
at least you could dance. I almost did not graduate college because my left foot does not wanna tap dance, but my right foot will. So so
That's so
at least
funny.
there was that. But, you're so right as that, and, there are studies around having that perfectionistic quality or growing up in a household where, you're always striving for perfection and it's never good enough. And it makes me think of the saying that so many of us have heard over and over and over again is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. I don't know if I believe that to be true
Mhm.
as a blanket statement. However, if we are practicing perfection in multiple arenas in our lives, it is frankly naive of us to think that that's not going to affect something as deeply personal as the way that we treat ourselves and our body, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And, I just definitely want to show up for the fact that, I think that there's this misnomer of like life in recovery that I show up every day, you show up every day and experience so much body love and body
Mhm.
positivity and I think that for me when I was experiencing my eating disorder, what I thought recovery was this utopic place. Like and that's why I share with people all the time is that you recover to life, not utopia. Life is not
Mm.
sunshine, bunnies and rainbows. There's days where my body is not my friend and I really I don't like the reflection. There's days where I'm like super cool with it too. But the difference between then when I was in my eating disorder and now is that when I have a case of the icks, which happens, and typically for me, I've already decided what I'm going to look like before I even look in the mirror. And it has to do with anything but my reflection. It has to do with, am I stressed? Am I anxious? Am I this? Am I that? And that for me, like distorts the way that I see myself. Um,
Mhm.
Before I wouldn't be able to do life. I would probably punish myself. I would probably not be able to get out of bed. And the difference is now when those days happen, and I can absolutely say they're not a lot, they're definitely nothing compared to where I used to be. I might put on more comfortable clothes. I don't look in the mirror and I get my butt to work and I still participate in everyday life. And so I think that whoever's listening to this and like milling over the idea of like, well, I definitely don't want to be in my eating disorder anymore, but I'm not ready to be in total and complete recovery. Just know
Mhm.
that we're asking you to just take one step, just one, and just continue to take those baby steps moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, I love how you named that the case of the icks, and that's
Yeah.
it's wonderful. Like what a fantastic phrase to give it the exact weight that it deserves.
Mhm.
Like I really appreciate that sort of like, yeah, like I'm just feeling kind of icky
Mhm.
today
Mhm.
and this is what happens. This is life. This is human. But I want to go back to something else that you said about being in that middle ground of wanting to not live the existence that you're living right now. You know that there's something better. There's a lot of people who are in our community who listen to this podcast who they've shared with me that, they've struggled or they are struggling, and they want to get to a place where they can help other people in the way that you are doing in such a profound way. However, what I hear and what I know that I experienced myself, I'm curious to know if you did too, is I was so afraid for so long that I was nothing if I did not have my struggle by my side. And if I worked past it, that A, there would be nothing interesting about me,
Mhm.
and B, I might forget it and I might not be able to empathize with people.
Mhm.
And for me, that held me back from really, moving forward into the life that I knew was there
Mhm.
waiting for me. That is, like you said, not utopia, but it's
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious for people who are struggling with letting that part of their story evolve. What's been your experience with that, and what do you suggest for people?
Oh, I love that. I love everything about that question. I first and foremost, I just want to remind everyone that you are not your eating disorder, and I think that for me, that was such a big part of it. Is that I always thought it was who I was. It was my identity. I'm definitely here to tell you it's not who you are, it's what you're experiencing. And so, something that's been really cool that's happened over the last like 5 to 10 years in our field has we've slowly started to walk away from the term anorexic and bulimic and dropped the ick because the ick makes it an identifier. I am anorexic, for example.
Mm, mhm,
We don't say that. We don't say that with cancer, right? Like you don't say, I am canceric. You say, I have cancer. And that allows you to not be, okay, this is not, again, who I am. It's what I'm going through. The
mm,
other thing that I would say too is that, very honestly, there's a secondary characteristic that happens with eating disorders. So for many of us, we get attention when we're experiencing our eating disorder. To your beautiful words, we feel that that's what makes us different. And when that goes away, are people still going to care? And number two is, what's going to be there? And what happens is number one, absolutely. And what I will tell you, bar none, is that the relationships I've been able to have in my recovery blow any relationship that I would have had in my eating disorder 100% because I'm able to show up. And I think that that's really something that's incredible about eating disorders is that you can still function pretty much when you have an eating disorder. You can look like you're totally fine and be literally falling apart behind that mask, behind that
mhm,
cloak that you have established. So you're not going to lose that specialness. It's going to be filled with so many other things. And, I will tell you that I think once you experience an eating disorder and you're on your journey to recovery, I think you have two choices. And one is to close the door and never talk about it again, which absolutely 100% I'm showing up for that. And then you also have a choice to use it to do something to make a difference.
mhm,
And giving back and showing up and giving and helping looks totally different for so many people. I get contacted all the time from individuals that are in higher levels of care or might have read my book or read about the Alliance or heard a podcast, and they're like, I'm in residential care. When I get out, I want to start a nonprofit just like you did. And
mhm,
I think it's amazing that they want to give back. The first thing that I say to them is take a breath, focus on your healing, and give yourself the space and grace to fill up your cup. Because what I've seen happen to individuals that get into the advocacy space too quickly is that it can become very triggering for them. Because
yes,
once you start sharing your story, everyone knows someone that has experienced an eating disorder, I believe. The
mhm,
statistics show that. And so what happens is people start sharing with you their stories, and it's beautiful that they feel that connectiveness because that's really important. But it can become so much for you as that person. So take care of yourself, heal, build your recovery. And then what I like to say is connect with your team. Ask your team, like, do you think this would be good for my recovery? Do you think I'm ready? And when they say yes, you can do everything from volunteering at an organization like the Alliance, writing a blog post, contacting your legislators and asking them to support eating disorder legislation that's out there. There's so many different ways to show up in this space and to give back. And it's really important to make sure that while you're doing that, to continue to fill up your cup, because one of the things I learned very early on, and it was definitely a huge lesson for me, is that you cannot pour from an empty cup. You need to put on your oxygen mask too. And I say that for those of us who walk this journey of advocacy post our eating disorders. And I also say that for loved ones of those who are experiencing eating disorders as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much about what you just said. And I feel like it applies as well to people beyond people who have had eating
Mhm.
disorders, people who have been diagnosed with mental illnesses,
100%.
people who are going through whatever struggle they're going through in their lives. If they're going through a tough divorce, it can feel really cathartic, especially if you're someone who is just innately called to be of service to others. It can feel so good to share. And especially, in the time that we're living in right now, where it's like Instagram is just literally a picking up of your phone away. It's really, really easy to post something, to write something, to get validation, and to very quickly be perceived as the person who's going to lead others into, the life that they want to lead. And that's really alluring. And I love what you said about asking your team, like, do you think that I'm ready? Beyond that, what else might you suggest to someone who wants to be a leader, wants to either everything from just inspire others to start an organization
Mhm.
like you did, to sort of self-assess? Am I ready? And how can I set up boundaries when I've gone too far? Because
Mhm.
I know that's happened to me. I'm sure
Ooh.
that that's happened to you. Like,
Mhm.
it happens to everyone
Mhm.
because we're human and none of us are pros on what we know our boundaries are going to be all the time?
Oh my gosh, yes. So my poor husband always says there's three of us in our marriage. It's you, me, and the Alliance, and so it's definitely been. I would say, you know what? It's going to be an opportunity to try it out and learn from your mistakes, and utilize them as opportunities to keep on moving forward. That's really what I would say. Is like, start off small, hands down, start off small. Like, one thing that I would do is, instead of going out and starting like your own organization, is, like what you said, maybe start an Instagram account where you're posting certain things.
Mhm.
But then also, for in the guise of boundaries, like maybe allow yourself a certain amount every day to be on Instagram.
Mhm.
Curate your time, curate your posts, to make sure that they stay, in that healthy boundary for you. And if you enjoy that, then maybe take the next step and, maybe reach out to other organizations that are there and say, I have this idea for a project, let's work together. I would never ever hold back anyone from following their gut and chasing their dream, because for me, when I was 21, the Alliance was my dream. And, I took a look around, and I will say I am so grateful to live in a time where the youth voice is so appreciated and lifted up. When I started
Mm.
the Alliance, doors were closed constantly. I would be asked, like, okay, where's my boss when I would walk in a room? Where's my parents when I would walk in a room? And it was so much harder to navigate, truthfully. And so I love that these days it doesn't matter what your age, who you are, where you come from. There's incredible platforms to utilize your voice and to make a difference. And so, um, I will fully say that, oftentimes people say that it is my stubbornness that has gotten me where I am today. I think that for me, I like the word tenacious a little bit more, because
I prefer that too. Yeah.
like, I've really learned that no is an answer, and then in my mind, it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to be the final answer. But you don't know if you don't know, and there was so much of my experience with the Alliance where I was working 3 jobs to keep the organization going. And, I had so many no's along the way, and I just kept on putting one foot in front of the other. And for me, it's not about where the organization is, it's what we've been able to do. And being like a bystander in someone's journey is really the best gift in the world. To be in a space where you see life come back into someone's eyes, that is like beyond any monetary compensation. Sometimes I'll get, wedding invitations or, birth announcements, or, someone will say, I got into this grad school. It's literally, it blows my mind to know that I was a very small, but I was a part of that. And, that for me keeps it going. And, I would just say, listen to your gut. And, if it feels authentic for you to use your voice and make a difference, then you should absolutely do it safely.
I love
But do
that.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. And keeping the people around you who you can turn to, you can lean on,
Yep.
to sort of be a gut check when you feel
100%.
like
Mhm.
maybe like, okay, I don't know if my head and my heart are on the same page here. And I love the idea of, start mindfully,
Mhm.
curating your feed, curating how much time you're spending on Instagram or researching on like how to start whatever, do
Yep.
whatever, taking small but meaningful steps that also protect your journey. For people who are listening, we've talked a lot about the people who are actually experiencing
Mhm.
eating disorders. For people who are listening who might know someone who they think maybe they're experiencing an eating disorder, but they're not quite sure. Or maybe, this is a whole other topic. A lot of times, people who are in larger bodies that don't quote unquote look
Mhm.
like they have an eating
Mhm.
disorder
Mhm.
are oftentimes completely overlooked by their family, their friends, medical professionals, and they're suffering on such a deep level on the
Mhm.
inside. For people who either might suspect that they know someone who has an eating disorder, definitely know someone who has, they're like, I for sure know that they have an eating disorder, or might want to be a better ally to people that might not be getting the allyship that they really need in their lives. What do you suggest to the family and friends and
Mhm.
community?
Well, first and foremost, I just really want to thank you for bringing up, individuals that live in higher weight bodies, because those are the individuals that are the largest amount of individuals that do experience eating disorders. So they're the highest percentage of individuals that have eating disorders live life in higher weight bodies. And I will be the first person to tell you, atypical anorexia nervosa and anorexia nervosa have the same medical complications and same lethality rates. But to your amazing words, is that because people don't look like the textbook or Lifetime movie or are significantly underweight, they're like, well, you're fine. And oftentimes, folks in higher weight bodies are prescribed, even if they're experiencing eating disorders, prescribed what individuals that are at low weights go into treatment for. So restrictive diets and these compulsive exercise. So thank you for bringing attention to that. That's something I'm super passionate about. So
Mhm.
I think education first and foremost, that eating disorders do not discriminate between age, gender, race, class, body shape and size, sexual orientation, gender identities. Like, they affect everyone, and they show up and they look totally different for all types of folks. Your question about if you have a loved one that has an eating disorder, I would say first and foremost is to, find a time and a space to speak with them. And, maybe before then, let's even take a step back. And if you go to the Alliance's website, there's a ton of information on friends and family of individuals that have eating disorders. So it's a really quick read. Take a look at it just so you're armed with some information. And then when you're speaking to that person, make sure it's just the two of you. Don't make it an intervention. Don't make it a group thing. Make sure to use I statements. Talk about it
Mhm.
from your perspective, as opposed to, what are you doing? You're doing this. It's so unhealthy. It's so terrible. if you sort of shift the conversation to use I statements, I'm really worried about you. I've noticed this. I love you and I'm here to support you. It's a different feel in the conversation. It's a little bit more effectively communicating your concerns.
Mm-hmm.
The other things I will share too is the Alliance has a free weekly virtual support group for all loved ones of individuals with eating disorders. They're free. They're on Wednesday evenings at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Super easy to hop on, and even just to sit in and listen to the conversation. There's parents, there's children, there's siblings, there's friends, there's roommates, you name it. There's all types of folks that show up to support individuals that are experiencing eating disorders. You're not alone. Remember that. There's organizations, there's clinicians that are there to help you. Use I statements. Just make it you and them. And the last thing that I will say is if they do share with you that they do have an eating disorder, please encourage them to seek help.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like physiological illnesses, mental illness does not just get better on its own, nor is the person that's experiencing the mental illness able to recover on their own. It's like telling someone, that has, diabetes, I need you to really focus and and just really stabilize your blood sugars. And yeah, sure, there's some people that may have recovered or may have moved through their eating disorder, but more likely than not, we need and we deserve access to care to be able to work our way through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'd also like to add that as the support person, it's not your job to fix your loved
Thank
one.
you. Mm-hmm.
Your job is to support and love and to, I think, and I'd love to hear your take on this.
Mm-hmm.
I think asking, how can I support you, is really helpful. I know that was really, really
Huge.
helpful and huge for me, knowing that you have someone who's on your team versus someone who is suggesting, oh, well, you should do this. You should do
Yep.
this.
Yep.
I like to say that giving somebody an outcome is not giving somebody a strategy.
Amen.
You
I
know,
love that.
like what you perceive. And sometimes it's very hard for us as humans to distinguish, okay, is this something that is a strategy in and of itself? Or is this the result of putting into place a strategy that was so personalized for me? And so a lot of times we will make suggestions that actually are the result of so much work done beforehand. And a lot of times, especially when someone is so deep within themselves and consumed by their eating disorder, that's something that outside help, therapists, trained professionals,
Mm-hmm.
they're able to spot that and they're able to work with the person to devise strategies better. For anybody who's listening who feels that
Yep.
pressure of, I
Yep.
need to help this person, it's my
Mm-hmm.
job to make their recovery happen, basically.
Yep. Yep. And I'm so grateful you just said that. You can't love someone enough for them to recover. And I've learned that personally from when I was experiencing it. And I've learned it from supporting other people that are near and dear to me, that I can't love them enough to make them better. And I think it's so beautiful that you said, what can I do to help? How can I support? Oftentimes I help co-facilitate our Wednesday night friends and family group, and specifically parents will ask me a lot of the time, what would have been helpful that your parents said to you? And I really believe that hearing the words, I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. I'm so sorry that this is what you're going through. I love you and I'm here for you. Please let me know how I can support you. Like that, I don't know if I would have known what to say, honestly.
Right. But just hearing it is
And just
huge.
hearing it, what it would have done is that maybe in the moment I wasn't able to hear it, but some point in my journey, I would have remembered that conversation, and it opened the door that they were a safe person and that they were there to walk next to me. And I think it's so great. You specifically talked about that, is that loved ones, whether it's family, friends, teachers, mentors, whatever it is, that's all they want to do. And unfortunately, and I also say this quite a bit, is that if you are a parent of someone that has an eating disorder, when you gave birth to them or adopted them, there was not like a Yellow for Dummies book that said, in case your child has an eating disorder, please use this book. I have thought about writing it though, but I'm just, it's not going to make sense. And oftentimes things that feel so right are going to be some of the worst things to do for your loved ones with an eating disorder, being food police, fighting with them, those things are not going to be super helpful. So allowing yourself the grace to reach out to people that can help you, even going to therapy yourself. I'm a huge proponent of family therapy because as a loved one, you also need the tools for you, that oxygen mask for you, but you also need the tools to be able to best support your loved one.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you said that. And about therapy at large, really, I think that there's still this idea that you go to therapy when you are the one who has the problem, you are the one who has the issue. However, what that doesn't take into account that sometimes the problem is you don't know how to respond to or interact with someone who is having a really, really deep-seated problem. And you think, well, they need to go to therapy. They need to do this. But we are communal human beings, especially, even during this time where, like you said, we're physically distant, we're not seeing as many people. We are still finding ways to be in community with one another. And what I found is that my conversations with my community end up getting a lot deeper, a lot faster. And they were already pretty deep, so that's saying something. But we're holding each other super, super close right now, and we're holding space for each other in a way that maybe we haven't, or at an extreme we haven't before. And so, yes, even during this time when we might not physically be together, we still need to know how to love each other the best, how to get off the phone and not be completely plagued with and worried about someone for days on end after the conversation ends. It's such an important point, such an important point.
And I think that was such a learning curve for me, even with this pandemic, is even though, and I think I might have said this at the beginning, even though we have to be physically distanced, we don't have to be socially distanced. If you're concerned about someone, there's nothing wrong with sending them little messages and saying, hey, just thinking about you. How can I support you? I'm a huge fan of handwriting, of like writing them cards, letting them know that you care. Since I'm still a person who reads books, who checks books out of the library. Well, maybe pre-COVID, not right now, but writing cards to people. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I started writing a whole bunch of cards to my friends and my loved ones, just because I was like, you know what, like it's just a great little way to say hi and that you're thinking about them. And then the other little thing that I would say for individuals that are experiencing eating disorders and loved ones is, I'm a big believer of having outlets as a loved one and as someone with an eating disorder. For a lot of people, it's journaling. For some people, it's coloring. Some people, it's knitting. It's paint by numbers. I think that so often as a loved one, I tend to only grab those things when I'm super stressed or like as someone who is experiencing something. And then when you grab them, when you're not used to using them, they feel so awkward because you don't use them. So in the vein of not only is therapy for the person that's experiencing it, it's also for loved ones to build tools. And like for me, I'm like, I think you should go to therapy always when things are good, things are bad. It's just you get into the habit of using your voice, sharing your thoughts. The same thing for outlets. Like, I don't care if you've had a great day. Like, maybe journal about having a great day. I don't care if you've had a bad day, maybe sit down and color or do paint by numbers or do something just so your body gets used to that. I get to have some self-care time. I get to escape. Painting your nails, going for a walk, listening to some amazing music and dancing. Make that part of your daily repertoire, because then when you really need them, they won't feel so awkward. And then they'll already be a healthful and effective way to cope.
Oh, I love that. So we've talked about people who have eating disorders, people who have loved ones who have eating disorders. Before we wrap up today, I wanted to bring it around to, we talked a little bit about this, strangers on the internet.
Sure.
And I'm also in the fitness industry, so I see this
Mhm.
happen a lot
Mhm.
with my fellow instructors, and my colleagues, people who post before and after photos,
Mhm.
people who post on social media to keep them accountable for whatever journey they're on.
Mhm.
And a lot of times we will say things to people on the internet and we'll comment, and we will either be questioning something or we think that we're being supportive, and we're actually doing more harm than good, if that makes sense. And so I wanted to ask you, when it comes to seeing people who you either don't know in real life or you just know a very small sliver of their story,
Mhm.
what would you suggest is the most responsible way to engage with people on the internet, especially in people who are in the fitness space or who are talking about their body or something sort of like wellness related?
Sure, sure, absolutely. So I first sort of want to put out there. I have a lot of mixed feelings. Specifically, actually, I really don't enjoy like cancel culture specifically.
Mm,
I think that you never know folks' intentions, and sometimes even if there's the best intentions, it gets executed maybe in not the best way. And I feel like that is an opportunity for learning and growth. And so, for me, I have more of a visceral response to like before and afters because I know my personal experience with them. And I also know that that's not everyone's personal experience with them. So
right.
for some folks that have never had eating disorders or negative body image or disordered eating, that might actually be motivating for
Mhm.
them. I personally think it can be a little body shaming and like weight stigmatizing, but that's my personal philosophy that I've experienced on my journey. So for me, any opportunity is an opportunity to teach and learn. So how I have done it personally is I've written them as a DM, not publicly. I don't think that we should shame folks. And basically say, hey, thank you for doing X, Y, and Z. I just want to share from my perspective how this might be interpreted and what this might cause for some people to do. I'll be very direct, like things
Mhm.
like any type of movement where instructors are punitive, where it's let's do this so that you can burn off X, so that you can do that. Like
Mhm.
honestly, it's just not a space I go back to. And I do leave messages for those folks, and I do share, hey, I want you to know that I think you're a great instructor, and this is why I'm not showing up anymore. And
Mhm.
I've had some people say nothing or good riddance, and then I've also had some people say, you know what, I never thought about that before. And so
Yeah.
so I guess just being open to the opportunity to teach and not shame and not cancel. I mean, clearly there's some people that obviously I don't believe should have a voice or a platform. I just curate at that point. But if you see someone who's saying something, even if you're not saying it for yourself, think about all the other people behind you that might have an issue with it and allow that opportunity for change. Because I
Mm.
do believe there is possibility for change. They might not listen to you, but what if they do? And on the flip side of that, if they're people that are doing it right, let them know that.
Mhm.
Because I think we're so quick on right away responding when things are bad, but we don't embrace the good. And how will people know that they're doing good if there is no positive feedback? So
Mhm.
I guess that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I love that. That is absolutely wonderful. And I think that was the perfect note to end on. But before we end, I want to talk about the Not One More weekend that is coming up.
Sure.
If people are listening in real time, I believe it's the last weekend in February. Can you tell
Mhm.
people more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for asking
Oh, of
about it.
course.
So, February is Eating Disorders Awareness Month, with the last week being Eating Disorders Awareness Week. And because of the pandemic and really, keeping folks safe and at home, we typically have in-person events. across the country during that week. So we decided to do Not One More Weekend, which is over February 26th, 27th, and 28th. It's an entirely virtual weekend based on our pillars at the Alliance. So access to care, so reaching out for help, support, and celebrating recovery for those people that are not there yet, and those people that are on their way, and also for all the loved ones that support people with eating disorders. So Friday, we're going to urge individuals to pick up the phone and ask for help, to go on Find ED Help, but really to connect to care. Saturday, we're going to do a 16-hour group marathon. So from 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to midnight, every hour on the hour, there's going to be a different support group for individuals to hop on all over the globe. So, we have general eating disorder groups, eating disorders and substance use, or LGBTQ plus groups for loved ones of those experiencing eating disorders. And then Sunday is our day of celebrating recovery and doing things like, downloading images that we have on our website and putting them on your social channels to raise awareness about eating disorders, to reach out to your members of Congress through the Eating Disorders Coalition Phone to Action and urging them to sign on to really important legislation that will make a huge difference in the lives of individuals that have eating disorders. And last, to join us for our Rally for Recovery, which is at 6:00 p.m. on Sunday, February 28th. Where we're just going to come together. We're thrilled to have Hunter McGrady be one of our speakers, as well as the fabulous Kitty Weston. Kitty lost her daughter, Anna, 20 years ago to anorexia nervosa, and has just become such an amazing advocate, and so many other incredible humans that are on their journey to recovery, that are living life beyond their eating disorders, and also a celebration of the lives that we lost. Because as much as I root myself in recovery, I'm also very painfully aware that every 52 minutes in this country, someone dies as a direct result of their eating disorder. And so that is really the reason that we have Not One More, because we believe that not one more life needs to be stolen, not one more moment needs to be taken from individuals that are experiencing the eating disorders and from the loved ones that love them so much. So for more information about the weekend, people can log on to notonemore.co and learn all about the weekend, and would love to have you join and have as many people as we can join in on the weekend.
Well, it sounds so incredible. I love how all-encompassing and holistic it is, and I really love that you stressed the celebration aspect of both people who are here and who are no longer with us. Because I truly believe that we need more celebration in our lives, and just because someone is gone because they experienced something, they so-called lost their battle, they had a life that is worth celebrating. And each of us has a life worth celebrating. And that's why, that's why recovery is so amazing, because choosing to recover, I believe, or to make your way towards recovery, is choosing to celebrate who you're meant to be in this world.
1,000,000%. And that it's possible. And I think that what I'm so grateful for today's conversation is that, there's times where I'll go and I'll visit a treatment center and I'll go in and I'll speak and I'll share that, I consider myself recovered. That's the terminology I have chosen. And, people will be like, I've never met anyone who's completely recovered. And that breaks my heart, because there's so many people that have struggled with an eating disorder and are in recovery, and they're living the life that they always have been meant and destined to be. And that no matter where you are on your journey to recovery, whoever is listening to this today, you're not the exception to the rule. I say this all the time, is that what makes you so damn special that you don't deserve to see recovery, to try recovery? And I'm very aware that there's many hindrances. Access to care is the biggest one. Managed care can be one too. But know that you're not alone, and that it gets better, because I can absolutely say this, and I'm sure you would agree, that recovering from an eating disorder was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. It's also the best thing I ever did in my life, because my worst day in recovery surpasses my best day in my eating disorder by far. It's not perfect. It's not pretty. It's messy. And it's exactly right.
Yeah.
And you get to do it too. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. And what's so incredible is that, for so many people that I've talked to, it's not a before and after experience. You don't wake up one day and be like, wow, look at me.
There it is.
I'm recovered. But it's this gradual build, just like anything, building anything in life, where one day you have a moment or a thought and you go, I guess I don't struggle with that anymore. Or I guess I don't do those things anymore. And it's sort of this realization of who you've become along the way. Someone who we had on the Wantcast earlier on, in the Wantcast journey, we had a whole season around recovery. Her name is Lynn Chen, and she's an actress, and she's a eating disorder awareness activist. And she said something like, recovery is not going back to how you once were, because you never will be who you once were. You have this whole breadth of experience and this knowledge that whether you like it or not, you have it as a part of you. Recovery is about moving into sort of, what we're experiencing collectively as a globe right now, slowly but surely moving into what will eventually be your new normal.
100%.
And this new version, this new iteration of who you are. And that's a beautiful thing. It can be scary, but it's a beautiful thing.
And you're not supposed to have all the answers right away. Like, that's really what I want to just really reiterate, is that no one's asking you on day one of recovery, all right, who are you now? Like, I still don't know what my favorite color is, and that was like such a big question. Like, I don't know, what do you like to do? I have no idea, and that's okay. You keep on learning, you keep on discovering. And what I learned is that I don't necessarily have a favorite color. It changes depending on, and that's okay. And I don't have to tell you everything I like, everything I want. It's a journey, and it's a journey for a reason. And, even though like my all or nothing, black or white, like brain always comes back to, and you should know it, and you should know, and you have to know. No, you don't. No, you don't. Like 21 years later, I'm still figuring this out, and that's okay, because the journey continues. Like the chapter may end, the book does not. There's always another chapter. And I will also say is that, for me, my biggest gift of recovery, and I said this yesterday when I was talking to someone, is, I had this moment a few years ago. It was the day after Thanksgiving, and I convinced my poor husband to go shopping with me at the mall day after Thanksgiving. Who wants to do that? And I have a 4-year-old little girl. She is the love of my life. She's also a miracle, because for 20 years I was told that I couldn't have kids because of my eating disorder, and she just appeared, shocking to both of us. And we were lamenting, we were walking, of just how amazing she was. And I looked at my husband and I said, she's the best thing I ever did. And he stopped and he looked at me. He said, no, she's not. She's pretty damn amazing, but she's not. Your recovery is the best thing that you ever did, because without your recovery, she would not be here. We would not be here. The Alliance wouldn't be here. And whenever I look at her, and she's got these huge blue eyes, clearly not mine, but she makes it all worth it. And please hear me. I know how you have to go to hell and back to recover through an eating disorder. And there's so many moments that you want to give up, but we're here to tell you not to give up. Like, white knuckle it if you have to, take a break, sit down, but then pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep on moving forward, because it really is worth it. So.
Amazing. Well, there are 3 questions that I ask everybody at the end of every single episode. 3 questions. You can take as much time as you need with them. The first question is, what is your definition of positivity?
My definition of positivity is something that my mom says all the time for me, is do not worry. If a door closes, a window will always open. And so for me, positivity is not harping at the closed door, but looking to the window, because there's always a window.
I love that. Next question is, when do you feel the most like yourself?
When I feel the most like myself is probably very early in the morning or right before I put my daughter down. Well, she loves to dance. She is a crazy little dancer and has the most eclectic taste in music. This morning, she wanted to listen to Imagine Dragons.
Great.
Right. And so moving around, dancing with her is probably the most authentic I feel because I'm not on, I'm just me. And it's pretty great.
All right. And the last question, Johanna, is I define fearlessness as when the fear that you have is less than the faith that you have in yourself. So fearlessness is when the fear is less than the faith. Keeping that in mind, what makes you feel fearless?
So my favorite quote of all time, and I think you might actually know this, is the saying, "Feel the fear and do it anyways." And that is my North Star. It's always been my North Star. So what makes me feel fearless is coming back to that and saying, I have every right to feel fear and I continue to walk through it. So for me, it's showing up and saying I'm scared and I'm going to do it anyways.
Love it. So if people want to find out more about you, more about the Alliance, get involved, you gave the URL for the Not One More weekend, but where can they find out more about you and the Alliance?
Absolutely. They can log on to allianceforeatingdisorders.com. It is plural, so allianceforeatingdisorders.com. Or they can follow us on any of our social channels at Alliance for EDA. And of course, please do not hesitate to give us a call. Our number is 866-662-1235. And something that's real special at the Alliance is our referral team is comprised of licensed and specialized therapists, and they're here to help and they're here to support. So reach out, join us for Not One More weekend. We have some amazing volunteer and internship opportunities at the Alliance. But more than anything, just know that you're not alone and we're only a phone call, an email, a tweet, smoke signal, carrier pigeon away. We're here.
That was Johanna Kandel. If you would like to learn more about Johanna, head on over to womenagainstnegativetalk.com and check out the show notes, or go to allianceforeatingdisorders.com to get involved in their Not One More weekend and learn all about what the Alliance is doing. Thank you so much for spending this time with Johanna and I. I know your time is valuable, and I am just so grateful that you choose to spend it here. As always, move forward fearlessly, spread the good word, and be the you know you're meant to be. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.